Was it like a moral decision in any way? See, I grew up like so conservative, and weed was essentially like next to murdering someone, and so like it took me. It was like it had to build up in my soul to pull the trigger to be the shooter on that one. And so like, did it matter to you at all, or was it just like a passive thing? Were you worried your parents were gonna find out?
I mean, I was a bit worried, but I grew up with pretty hippie parents, and so they were the type of parents that were like were aware of the things that are out there. If you want to try them, like even for alcohol, it was like if you want to try that, try it at home first and have a little sip here and there, and then they even offered to like buy me alcohol when I wanted it, so that I could have a do it at home, have a safe place to do it. So they were quite open with that stuff.
Is that a common thing in Canadian culture, or is that like a common thing in your neighborhood, or was that not normal?
Um, I I don't know necessarily that it's a common thing here. I think there is still that aspect of it being a rebellious act and that kind of thing. I think for my parents, my mom's from England, so I think she's brought a bit of that European side of because in Europe a lot of kids get introduced to like wine and other stuff a bit younger, and so it's less of a an exciting thing or a rebellious act in that way.
Okay. And then I'm sorry, I keep cutting you off because you keep making me think of interesting things. But yeah, you were saying that you got offered it, you tried it, it wasn't so significant, and then you were going to tell me about like the real first time.
The real first time,
Right.
yeah. The real first time was me, like when it was legalized here in Canada a few years ago. I'd always been curious about it, and this was a perfect chance to try it out. And so I went with my ex, and just like she had smoked before, and so we just like went out in the park and smoked. And I felt so it felt so illegal to be doing, but it was completely legal and it was fine. But it was yeah, it was. I mean, I got high and I felt it a bit, and it felt weird. Um, and it was, I don't know. I think at the time it almost felt like disappointing. Of like, oh, well, this is what this big thing's been about. Like, it's not that bad. It's really nice. It's a fun feeling.
Did you tell your parents when you smoked weed for the first time?
No, I don't think I did actually.
Have you ever smoked weed with your parents?
No, I haven't. But I mean, my parents did grow weed one year, and so yeah, they have their own stuff there.
Do you? I mean, does that ever come up? Because it sounds like you smoke marijuana plants, and they apparently grow marijuana plants, and like that just seems like I mean, you eat dinner over there at some point, maybe I assume. Like it just see. I mean, is that? What do you think about that? Do you think you'll ever smoke weed with your parents? Like, kind of why? Yeah, that's an interesting thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I could. I don't know. It almost feels like a weird barrier to cross, but I don't know why it's weird. I think it's just something I haven't done, and I might at some point. I mean, I bought them like a THC drink a while ago for them to try because they hadn't tried the drinks before.
Did you try one with them?
Oh, I've had them before. No, I think it's still sitting in their fridge. I don't think they've had it yet.
I see. Have you ever had alcohol with your parents?
Yeah, yeah.
I I also recognize that it's there's a difference. I can see that as well, but I also see that like there's not really a difference. And I'm trying to figure out like, bro, what is that? What is you see it too, right? Like you see the same thing I'm talking.
Yeah.
What is it? I'm going to write this
I don't know.
down.
I think, yeah, I think weed is one of those things that it's because it was such an illegal thing. It was such a, um, I don't know, there was so much stigma around it. But really, it's no different from alcohol in terms of, if anything, I think it's better than alcohol
Yeah.
in the ways that like what it does to you. Like as a nurse, I see what happens to
No.
people who drink alcohol
I
in their entire life, and I see what happens to people when they smoke weed,
I
and
I can see
alcohol's worse.
I can see all of that. Like I can see all of the logic of that. Like that's very clear as well. Like I can see that. So like I'm very convinced about that. The thing that I don't understand is this other thing that I can't really see because like what what is the weird part about it? Like Okay, we can move on because I don't think either of us know the answer. But it's interesting to know that we can both see like that's some invisible shit
Yeah.
that's very real, even though it's also invisible. That's reality's weird. That's weird. Okay. And I didn't mean to totally divert you there, but after you smoked weed with your ex, did that change anything between you guys? Because like smoking drugs is kind of an intimate experience, you know what I mean? And if this is the first time you ever
Hmm.
smoked weed, like what was that significant? Did you talk about it? Did you smoke weed like the next day or like what was that about?
Yeah, it was a very intimate thing. It was something I obviously hadn't really done before, and so it felt very safe to do that at the time with my ex. And yeah, we talked about it afterwards, and we smoked again a lot more afterwards. I mean, she started to use it for like appetite issues and other things like that. So it did become a very common thing for us and a nice way to relax in the evening instead of alcohol.
Mm. Did you ever, people when you start smoking weed, I remember, and it's kind of like there's the shoreline, and you're kind of dipping your toe in and dipping your toe in, and inevitably, for most people, like a child, you'll end up getting a little overconfident, especially in the beginning. Did that ever happen to you?
Yes, absolutely. There was there was one moment that I remember very well where I, I mean, I had never greened out at this point, and I guess that's what happened because I was smoking weed with my ex, and we were chatting with a neighbor who was out there too, and I was just smoking away, and suddenly things just started to get real dizzy, and I just keeled right over and just completely lost consciousness.
Oh man. And that could be a little bit of a scary thing. So how long was it after that experience that you were like, fuck it, I'm down?
I think like a week and a half, 2 weeks, like it didn't really deter me.
You're strong. That we had for you here was if we were to switch lives and I was to have to live your life, what do you think I'd find the most challenging?
I found this question really interesting because I wanted to preface it with another question
Mm.
of like if we switch bodies, like do you get the skills that I get? Because I feel like if you tried to work as a nurse that and didn't know how to do it, that would be kind of difficult.
Yeah, so I think if I was, it would be me living your life. So like I would essentially be inside of your life. So I would be you. So like I would still remember all the things that you remember. Like I would be. Did you ever
Hmm.
watch Dollhouse from like the early 2000s? Do you remember that show?
I don't think so, no.
Okay, well, it's the kind of a long. The part that's relevant is that she gets uploaded into a person and she is that person, and then it's significant because when she leaves she can like retain the people that she was before, but essentially like you get uploaded and like she remembers who she's been before, but she is also now this person. And so like if she's a doctor, like she shows up and people are like, hey doctor blah blah blah, your appointment's at 3, and then he gets there and he's like, oh I guess I know how to do surgery, or like, oh I guess I know how to do kung fu, or like, you know what I'm saying?
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, that makes sense. Well, yeah, in that case, I think one of the biggest things that came to mind is that um, talking about mental health, everyone is fighting a different battle, and to be able to step into someone's shoes and try to take on their battle is, I think, next to impossible. And if you've lived with that battle your entire life, you've learned certain ways to deal with it. But I think to step into someone else's shoes and try to live their life, I think that would be the biggest thing that I would think of.
Hmm. Hmm. And I mean, like, I don't want to get too deep, but like, if that was the case, like for your life, like, what would that be? And like, if I could just cut that out if you don't want to share that, but if you do want to share that, like, that would be interesting to know.
No, I'm happy to share. Well, I think for me, I've had a huge amount of changes in the past like 6 to 8 months, like a career switch, going back to school, a breakup, a lot of things changed like that. And I think for me, I've grown in my mental health and learned to look at myself more and to love myself more. And I think back, to when I didn't have those things and I wasn't loving myself enough and I wasn't looking after myself. And I think that's one of those things that, yeah, if someone were to step into my body, they would also struggle with that. And yeah.
What what do you think changed in your like how did you know that those things were happening? So like what did you notice that you said, "Oh shit, like something like did you receive less interest from a specific activity and like what was that activity or did you just not like what changed in your life that you realized, "Oh shit, something is not as it was."
Well, I mean, I think the breakup was the biggest thing. Like that made me realize how much I was kind of basing my life around other people's lives and not building my own. And so when, you know, with a few relationships, when those people have left, I suddenly realized that I feel like a shell of myself, that I wasn't spending time with friends. I wasn't doing things that I wanted to do. I wasn't leading my life in my own direction. So when I lost the direction that was the other person, I felt very lost.
Bro, that is resonating with me in such an extreme way because it's like, you kind of begin building a thing of like, okay, like I am like you're not building your own thing, you're building a team, like a team thing. And so like all of a
Mhm.
sudden now when you're left on your own thing, you don't have the support to be a single building. You were building like a bridge type building, and now you have to be like a skyscraper type building, and the weight is all fucked up. So like the pressure on this side of the building that like you didn't give a fuck about really before because like yeah that's over there and like my thing's over here, and then like oh my god my foundation is fucked and like why is all this shit like rusted and like are you serious, no inspector has come here since 19 fucking 99, what is happening? And like and then all of a sudden like bro you've been building up at the top and you've been like updating the furniture and putting in like skylights and like I'm gonna have a French door here, and now all of a sudden oh god you're back in the basement pouring concrete digging ditches for this foundation that you like I I'm not I'm not ignorant to the fact that like somewhere in my mind, like obviously I knew like, yeah, Andrew, you should have enough of your own person that you're your own person. Uh I'm sure I knew that somewhere, but for some reason, like I didn't take it seriously because it, it didn't seem I I couldn't I couldn't see or perceive how it was affecting my life. And because I was ignorant of that, I wasn't aware of how it was affecting my life. But I can see how much I would have, my previous relationships would have, all these things in my life would have been improved had I filled in these foundational gaps of myself. And like the only way that I've been able to just keep going after these fucking crushing things was that like if I hadn't had those experiences, when the fuck would I made this foundation? Like and like I should have done it when I was a child, really, but I managed to avoid that responsibility. And so like oh god, I can't imagine how much worse it would be had I waited longer, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. I'm a huge believer in not regretting things in your life, because if you regret them and wanted to change them, you wouldn't be where you are right now. And I think it's so important to love where you are right now and to love the horrible experiences you've had, because they built you as a person, and you'd be different otherwise.
Bro, here is the other thing that is absolutely banana sandwich crazy. Is that like I I can't even ever like the your relationship and breakup and all those things like is like a totally like I imagine it as like a film, not only in a different language but like from a different country that was made at a different like language and a different frequency at a different frames per second at a different time, but like at the same time it is like very similar to like not only my little movie but like so many other people's movies. And like that is so weird that all of these distinctly different things can also be like distinctly the same. What the fuck is that, man? That seems like a sequel.
Yeah,
Like what's happening with that, bro? What is that? That's another
Yeah,
invisible
exactly.
thing.
It's so funny that because it is so similar. But going back to the question, like if someone were to jump into
Huh.
another person's shoes and they were, you know, having that same experience, it would be as you say, a completely different thing in another language, in another setting, and yet oddly similar, oddly familiar.
Yeah. I think like the more of these contrasting patterns that I recognize in life, the more they see that they seem the same, and like I don't I don't really know how I feel about that. Like it's a little bit scary, but it's also kind of exciting, but it's also kind of like familiar, like duh, like of course, right? Like obviously. That's that's a lot of feelings, man.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like it's one of those things that you're like, yeah, I was told this a million times, but until you experience it, you're not really gonna understand it ever.
um yeah. Is there anything you want to add to that question before we go to the next one?
Not really. No, not that I
I
can think
feel
of.
like we did a really good job on. I'm gonna give us an A plus for that one. Um, okay, the next one was just kind of a broad question of like, what do you miss the most in your life? And like, there's no time
I,
frame. There's no. I mean, this is like an endless canvas of space. Like, there's no nothing.
I know. I like this question too. I liked all of your questions actually. These were
Thanks,
really
man.
good ones because they made me think and they made me ponder about a lot of things. And I think kind of tying back to how I was feeling after my breakup that I think I missed being my authentic self. I felt like I hadn't been me in a very long time, and I think now I'm just starting to learn how to do that again.
What are some what are some things that you've kind of tangibly noticed or that you've had as a marker that you said like, oh, okay, like this is distinctly me, like this is me now that I was not before, or that I was only kind of tangentially aware of. So like what what changed where you said like, oh, this is now a piece of me that I register as me now?
I think that the use of my time was a big one that even just like mentally, that I felt like I put so much mental energy into other things of trying to make time with a partner or other stuff. But now I get to make time with friends that I wasn't doing before, and I get to socialize. I get to decide what I want to do. And I felt like I wasn't doing that before. I felt like I was, on a path that I didn't have much control over, or I felt like it just wasn't going. I felt like I was in a canoe without a paddle, just heading down a river. And now I feel like I've found a paddle and I'm building myself a motor, and I'm gonna be able to go upstream now if I want to.
And I mean, not to drill too deep if you're not comfortable, but like what what is that kind of paddle, or what is that stream that you have changed? And I mean, just to like, I mean, give you some context. What I've noticed that's been different with my time is that like, just in a broad sense, just like kind of building more and consuming less. Like I what I'm doing right now is a perfect example, because like in one sense of the word, like yeah, it's setting up a phone and a thing, and well, how long could that take? But in another sense of the word, like it has taken me like an indescribable amount of effort to like emotionally be comfortable, to have like enough space in my life and space in my time, and like having time to figure out who I am and what I want my future to be required some of that discomfort, but it also now allowed me to fill in some of this foundation. And so like that's like that's the thing in my life that's changed. And it doesn't have to be like a broad thing, but it could be like, I don't know, you find yourself able to go to the gym more, watch content that you watch that you want more, or play a game or a sport or a hobby or something that you know what I'm saying?
Hmm. Yeah, no, I think yeah, using my time differently has been a big one that like this year I set myself a goal of trying to do 50 push-ups, and I started this year not being able to do a push-up, and
Nice.
now I've been doing little bits here and there, and by the end of the year I want to be able to do 50.
How many
And
push-ups can you do now?
right now I can do probably like 15 in a row,
Bro,
and that feels so good.
yeah, man. And like, how did you go from 0 to 1 push-up? Because that's the challenge, man. That's not easy. That's like, the snowball. That's you have to start with little snowflakes. And so like, how did you do that? How did you do that? That's crazy.
I mean, I started just doing like angled push-ups just against like a desk or a counter, and just doing like really simple stuff and making sure that I did, because my goal was to do 50 every day of something.
Mm.
And so even if it was just a super easy one of some kind, just to build up some muscle and get to the point where I can do one push-up and then just keep going from there.
Nice, man. That's so great, bro. I'm gonna check in with you in a few months, and we are gonna see how far away from 15 push-ups you are,
Perfect. I
man.
love that. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. And I get so distracted, bro. Just to bring it back, as far as what you're doing with your time, is there anything else that you want to talk about, or do you feel like we got that one pretty good?
Um, I think I don't know. I wrote down a couple of things here.
Mm,
The main thing was I felt like before I was changing myself around someone else's plan. That in one of my previous relationships, I literally found myself thinking, okay, this person wants to move. How am I going to adjust my life to be able to move with them?
mm,
And when that relationship ended, I realized that I didn't want to move. I didn't want to do those things, but I was building my life around that because that was what they said they wanted to do. So now I feel like I'm building my life around what I want to do. That I get to wake up every day and do some push-ups, and I can watch that progression. I get to wake up every day and decide I'm going to school now. I'm bettering myself for that. I'm finding a better job that I want to do, and it's all for me. It's not for anyone else. It's all for me.
and just an interesting contrast. Like, do you think that in the alternate timeline where you're still together, the alternate thread of the universe over there, do you think that version of you ever does 50 push-ups? Do you think that person, because obviously you wanted to at that time, right? You knew somewhere in your mind that was a thing you wanted to do. And so like, you mentioned now you have the time, and like, do you think that other timeline, and you don't have to just say no to make us feel better for the story, like authentically, like, do you think that version of you does it?
I I mean, I think maybe, but I think in a much less consequential way, that maybe at some point I would have got to the point where I could do 50 push-ups, but it wouldn't have mattered in the same way, because this is doing 50 push-ups now is almost symbolic for me of finding myself and doing things for me. And maybe at some point I'd have been able to do the 50 push-ups, but I don't think I'd have found myself in the same way.
It's a beautiful thing, man. Oh, that's so great to hear. um okay, is there anything else? You said you wrote down a couple points. Is there anything else that you'd written down on that?
No, that was everything for that one.
Nice. Okay. The next one, and now you mentioned you smoked weed, and I haven't asked you about anything else in your life, but this is like a broad question, and like, just impacted your life. And so like that, how has drug use impacted your life positively or negatively?
I think it's done both for me in a lot of different ways. I think it's played multiple roles for me at different times. It's been an escape for me at times, a way to numb myself, a way to not feel things that I didn't want to feel. But it's also been, transformative for me in some ways. Like I've had mushrooms before, and those for me have been a wonderful experience. That recently, the most recent time I did it, I reconnected with a friend, and that a friend that I hadn't chatted with a long time, and that's been a huge change for me. And so it's also been a very positive thing in my life.
Toby, you can't say some wild shit like that and like, what the fuck, Toby, bro. Now you're making me go to two things here. Well, when was the first time you took mushrooms, bro? Because usually that's like, you know, not to sound like a dare, but like usually smoking weed's the very the gateway to doing better drugs. And so what was that like? And like I'm pretty sure shroom were they illegal back then? I don't know. But like now you said that you didn't smoke weed until it was legalized. And so like
Mhm.
when did you cross the line? Did you become a criminal, Toby? Are you a criminal like me,
Well, I
quick as
mean,
thieves?
officially, if anyone asks, I've never done this,
Never.
obviously.
Obviously this is an act. This is all script. See, I have a paper.
It's all
Right,
hypothetical.
right, right.
Yeah. But speaking to that hypothetical, the first time I tried it was actually I was on holiday and kind of found
That
a like
is some international shit to
a
say.
shop.
You just said you're
Yeah,
on
I was in
holiday?
Maui.
No, the fact that you called it holiday, bro. I've never heard anybody say that except on the movies. That's so cool. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that was crazy. Man. That's a check in my list of life achievements. Holiday. I'm going on holiday. Oh shit. Okay, I'm sorry. I won't interrupt you
Glad to
again.
help
I'm
out.
being a bad host. I'm sorry. I'm learning. I'm still learning, Toby. Forgive me. I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead. I'm so sorry.
No, it's all good. Yeah, so I was in Maui and there was a shop there that found a loophole in the system somehow that was selling stuff legally. Um, so I had a very tiny dose there and felt a little bit of stuff. Things were a little brighter, things were a little more colorful. Nothing huge. But I would say the most transformative moment was when I did it kind of recently, and that was just on my own. I went to My parents were out of town, so I went to their place to look after the dog and the cat, and just I started drawing a bit, brought a guitar, just listened to music, had a fun time, and then ended up chatting with that friend for like 5 hours. No, it was kind of a mix. Like I had kind of a hookup to find them, and because I'd had some friends who had used them for parties and such, and it was kind of something I decided that I wanted to try again and to try a bit of a stronger dose. So I got them not really knowing any plan of what I was going to do, and then this weekend showed up perfectly, and I decided it was a good time.
Nice, man. And so after you reconnected with this friend and had all these conversations, do you think that like you've kind of maintained like this reconnection and being friends and hanging out and stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a friend from like high school from Ottawa, so it's not someone that I see very often at all. And I think, as I was talking about with my relationships, I wasn't really making time for friends. So this was a really important reconnection for me that I'm still chatting with him today, and it was a really cool thing to do.
Nice, man. Oh, that's so great. Um, okay, was there anything else that you wanted to cover? Or I don't want to move on without getting all the goods.
Oh, I think that's pretty much, yeah.
Nice. Okay, and then the last one was again kind of a broad question. When in your life have you felt the most free?
And again, I like this question. Um, it's I think the most recent thing that I can think of was going back to school and feeling like my life had direction again. That oddly, by having more structure in my life, I felt more free, that I was heading in a direction and I wasn't kind of floating around aimlessly. And I felt like that was my life for a little bit, that I was working, but I felt like work was my life, that it was working and then recovering from work and then working and recovering from work. So I think having that direction made me feel in control again and free to make my own decisions.
Is there any point that you can notice the largest contrast between points of like when you're saying you really kind of have taken control and you feel like you're the most free versus when you really recognized that you really didn't have that freedom? Like, is there any point in time or anything around that where you can recognize the contrast between maybe two of those times in your life?
Yeah, I think like the normal work schedule for nurses here is 4 shifts on, 4 shifts off. So it's 2 day shifts and then 2 night shifts and then 4 days off. And working those, they're exhausting at times. And so when I would come off my last night shift, I would come home and crash and sleep for a bit of that day and then feel like I kind of lost that day. And then try to wake up early enough the next morning to use that day. And it just felt like the days were slipping by all the time and I wasn't really doing much. And the times when I did, it was, just to clean the house or just really sort of maintenance things rather than feeling like I was heading in a direction. And then work would start again and the cycle would continue. And now I feel like, with the semesters with school, I feel like I get somewhere, I accomplish something, I get a mark out of it, and it feels good. It feels like I'm heading in, into a better place in my life. And even if I come out of this and I do something different afterwards, I feel like I've bettered myself, you know?
Tell me, that's so great to hear, man. Oh man, that's really wonderful, bro. Um, well, that's all I had for today, buddy. And I really appreciate you taking the time and giving such thoughtful answers. Is there anything else you wanted to add before I wrap it up here?
Um, Not really. I mean, I love your content. This is why I wanted to be on here. I'm really happy to be on here. I was nervous for it, honestly,
Ah,
because I don't know. You seem like such a positive vibe, and I felt so attracted to your content because of it, that it was so authentic and genuine, and that's something I've been seeking in my life. So thank you. Thank you for what
nice.
you do.
Thanks, man. Well, I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you watching. And yeah, thanks for coming on. And I guess.